I know where to find some water. It's coming right out of our water treatment plant. And as you recall, we have been in a position where we're forced to treat the water with reverse osmosis to reduce the chloride level below 100 milligrams per liter. And in order, when we go through that process, the results of using reverse osmosis is brine. We end up with a bunch of salty water. And that's what brine is, high concentrated salt in water. And it turned out that the method of disposal that was selected by our sanitation board was deep well injection. And it sounded at the time like a well. Deep well, remember, it didn't say deep wells, it said deep well injection. And it turned out that that wasn't really true. It turned out that it was 7 to 10 wells drilled horizontally to give you a 7-mile field of where you were going to inject water. And it was going to end up all underneath the west side homes. And our west side neighbors got up in arms and said, no, you're not going to do that. So there was enough yelling and screaming that the sanitation board decided that they would look for another option. And they came up with it. It actually was proposed originally by a West Side resident, John Hone, who talked about brine minimization. And so that's the intended method. And so now what they're doing is they're going through and revising the EIR to show brine minimization being used and trucking the brine to Carson as opposed to deep well injection. And for that purpose, they held three public meetings. I was out of town for the first two, so I attended the one on October the 6th. And basically, it was just really to see, well, what are these guys saying this time? Is this really going to happen? We're really going to use brine minimization? Is deep well injection dead? What's going on? And so they reminded us again about who treats our wastewater. We have the two water treatment plants, the one in Valencia and the one in Saugus, right there by Bouquet Canyon. And remember that we're only treating the water at the Valencia plant. We're only going to use RO at the Valencia plant and then mathematically average it with the output of the plant on Bouquet in Saugus to be under 100 milligrams per liter. And so these are their charts. I naturally stole them and maybe annotated them a little bit. And so they said, well, this chloride limit was set at 100 milligrams per liter. There was more treatment required, and the more treatment is the use of reverse osmosis and the elimination of the disposal of the brine. So we're working on a deadline, and every time I go to one of these meetings, I really would just like them to tell me, what are you doing? But we always got to throw in this little bit of stuff about, oh my God, the world's going to come to an end if we don't do this. They're going to fine us. We're going to get all these steep fines. And they reminded us of the $225,000 fine that we received for kind of dragging our heels that we had to end up paying. But what they don't really talk about is out of that $225,000 fine, $97,000 of it was returned to the city to be used on a project to retrofit a parking lot with permeable concrete. So it's not like as if the whole $225,000 went to where it was going. And also, the thing that they didn't mention, and that's because the sanitation district didn't really get involved in that, was the $816,000 agreed-to payment for Shangri-La dewatering. Underneath Shangri-La, by the library, by the Joanne Darcy Library, when they built that development, they disturbed an underground spring. And so in order to stabilize that part of the development, they've been pumping water out of there. And so they pumped the water straight out of the ground, and they deposited it straight in the river. And our Regional Water Quality Control Board says, oh, no, that's not good. You can't do that. That water's not good enough quality to throw away. Okay? So what they did was they agreed to this fine, $816,000, of which $417,000 of it was placed in escrow, supposedly was going to be released on May 18th, which didn't happen, to provide money to Newhall land over and above the satellite RO plant that they were tasked with building. Now, this gets a little confusing. I'm going to come back next month and we're going to draw all this out so that it's a little bit easier to understand. But what happened is this. While we were sitting here negotiating with the Regional Water Board and saying, nah, we don't think that this 100 milligram per liter standard is the right standard, the folks that were ready to build Newhall Ranch said, we'll comply. We'll comply with the 100 milligram per liter requirement. And they also made an agreement with the sanitation district with our sanitation district, the Santa Clarita Valley Sanitation District, that we would treat the first 6,000 homes in our water treatment plant, give them amount of time to get enough people online so they can build their own water treatment plant at Newhall Ranch. So here's this little satellite RO plant. And the plan, and now when I went to this meeting here, they're openly talking about it now. The plan was, and still is, that Newhall Ranch, up to the first 6,000 homes, would be sending their sewage down to the Valencia Water Treatment Plant. The Valencia Water Treatment Plant would provide tertiary treatment, which is what they had before. And then they would pump over to this satellite plant that's going to be built across the street the amount of treated effluent that was supplied to them from the Newhall Ranch project. The Newhall Ranch project would then perform reverse osmosis to reduce the effluent to below 100 milligrams per liter and send the resulting effluent back to the Valencia Water Treatment Plant for them to mix it in their output stream and throw it away in the river. That was the plan. You guys are all, this is a great plan, right? But in the meantime, what's happened is we at the Santa Clarita plant, Santa Clarita Sanitation District, have now agreed that we're going to do the 100 milligram per liter thing. And so we're building a reverse osmosis facility that will treat the entire output of our water treatment plant. Currently, we treat approximately 20 million gallons a day of water, and we have the capacity for 26.5 million gallons. If anybody wants to know what the first 6,000 homes in Newhall Ranch would be bringing down, that's approximately 1.5 million gallons a day. So we have plenty of capacity, and it no longer makes sense to build a plant off on the side. And so we'll talk about that a little bit, because I think we should be able to capture the funding for that plant for us to use. And we'll go through that some more. Well, anyway, we had this approved chloride compliance project in 2013, and where the little arrow was, they were going to go build they were going to go start drilling for that deep well injection field. And when that happened, that happened. And of course, the West Side guys were up in arms. Went to the sanitation district meeting, which was at our city hall, yelled and screamed. And I don't blame them. I mean, I wouldn't want them pumping all that stuff under my house. I don't know whether you'd like it under yours, but it just didn't seem like the right thing to do. And it seemed like the sanitation district misrepresented it from the start. Not a single well, 7 wells, 7-mile stream. So the new plan is to use brine minimization. And if you remember one of the old plans, remember they had 4 options? You remember the 4 options? One of the options was to do RO and to truck all the brine to Carson. But they decided it was too many trucks. And the county said, no, we don't want you to do that because there's too many trucks. But now what they're talking about is with brine minimization, it would be an average of 6 to 10 trucks a day. And it would be done in the off hours. It would go down to Carson. So there's an average of 6 and an estimate of 10 trucks maximum. And my question to them was, why Carson? Right? Carson seems like a long ways away, doesn't it to you? It doesn't seem like a reasonable thing to do. Why are you going to Carson? And I looked at the map of the joint outfall system because they kept talking about, we have this joint outfall system. And the joint outfall system, we have sanitation districts all around the Los Angeles County, and they just put their effluent in there. And so I said, why not La Cañada Flint Ridge? I mean, that's half the distance, okay? And of course, we peel this onion one layer at a time. We never, because now what I'm told is the joint outfall system is not a monolithic thing. It is, some areas of the joint outfall system just takes effluent to go to the ocean, where other parts of it take effluent to go to other treatment plants to be reused. And the La Cañada Flint Ridge plant is on one of the trunks where they're trying to reuse water, and the Carson one is on one where they're going to dump it straight in the ocean. And the Carson one is out of any residential areas and can handle the truck traffic. So that was the rationale. I'm amazed. In many cases, I find that the best thing our sanitation district guys do is provide rationale of why what you said doesn't make sense. That seems to be what they do the best of. And one of the questions I had to them during the time we were doing this initially is I asked them, I said, why is it that New Hall Ranch is going to build this satellite plant? Why don't we just take the money that was going to be used to build that plant and use it to build our plant? Right? Doesn't sound reasonable? Because once New Hall Ranch builds their own water treatment plant up farther up into their area, they're going to create their own sanitation district, and they don't need that plant anymore. And they told me, I remember very distinctly, we're not sure when the money for that would become available. It's probably going to be too late. We're probably going to have to build first. So now that we're really talking about this again, and I went and asked the question again. I said, okay, now we've decided we're going to build this plant. Why don't we get the money from that New Hall Ranch project and use it to build our plant? And the answer I got was, well, our project probably won't be built in time to satisfy their needs. And so, like I said, it doesn't matter what question you ask. There's always a reason not to. So anyway, they said cost and rate impacts of this project is similar to the one we were doing, with a little bit higher annual operating costs. And I know better than to ignore it when someone says it's similar. We ask, how similar? Well, it's about $4 million a year similar. So this thing is going to cost more to build and to run. And so they're talking about $4 million. And the rates that they talk about through 2020 are sufficient to start the project up. Do you remember? I don't know how many of you went to some of those meetings where they set those rates. But they set those rates to capture money. That's the whole idea of them. They're not to really run the plant. They just set them, and then they slowly get us a little bit more in line with what it costs on the next 30 years out. So they're going to use those rates through 2020. And they keep saying, well, we got $7.5 million in grants, and we're looking every way we can to minimize the ratepayer costs. And so again, I got to ask him, how come you're not going over and negotiating over there? But, you know, that's not the one that they want to do. So remember these fines, $816,000. This was an agreement between the city of Santa Clarita and the Regional Water Quality Control Board. And it was due to the putting water that was taken right out of the ground on the ground. And it was paid for, in part, by the stormwater district. So if you'll notice, that's on your tax bill. Okay? And then they agreed, in this agreement, to give the money to Newhall Ranch. And in the agreement it says it's over and above the cost of building this satellite plant. So it's a gift. And it's a gift of your money. And signed by Ken Pulskamp. And then the other $225,000, $97,500 of it, the sanitation district agreed with the Regional Water Quality Control Board that they would use that money for refurbishing a parking lot with permeable concrete. So I'm a little frustrated. I think, you know what, we have this supposedly now it was $130 million, now it's we add another $134 million project, and every time we look at it, we find out that there's more money going and being given away somewhere else, and we'll lay that out really clearly for you at the next meeting. But you have to remember that our sanitation district chloride project functionally, not per agreement, but functionally eliminates the need for a satellite RO plant. And to see one being built just to throw it away and waste that money, to me, is the wrong thing to do. So if they're looking for more money, I know where to find it. And we'll go talk to them about it. So here's the environmental review process. Same kind of nonsense that we go through before. We just went to the scoping meetings. Now they'll go away and they'll write answers to all our questions and come out with a final EIR draft, and then it'll go out for public review. And they're hoping to have this approved by the spring of next year so they can meet their commitments to the Regional Water Quality Board. So contact information if you want to ask any of them a question personally. It's Brian Langap. And here's his contact information, so you'll see it on the video, and you'll be able to go and use it. So, are there any questions about this thing? No. You guys as frustrated as I am over this? Yes. Anyway, we'll keep going. I've talked to Ken Striplin at the city about renegotiating the $417,000, and he said he would look into it. I realize that he can't make a commitment, but he said he'd look into it. The sanitation district, when I went to their meeting, I thought it was extremely interesting because I asked the question, and the answer I got from Ms. Hyde, who is the director of the sanitation district, was, you know, we have a really tight schedule. And I went afterwards and talked to her and said, you know, I wasn't talking about your schedule. I wasn't changing the project. I was just looking for a source of funding. And that's when Phil Freeze walked over and said, well, I think that they'll need to be online before us. And that's negotiable. Everything about this is negotiable. So we'll see what goes on, and I'll keep you guys posted. Yes, sir.
Does the sanitation district now meet in Santa Clarita every time?
No.
What was that? County or the suit?
The bill that you're talking about says that the sanitation district has to meet in Santa Clarita. It doesn't. It says it has to meet in the municipality itself anytime that TDMLs or rates are discussed. But other than that, it doesn't have to meet there. I really think that what our city and our sanitation district should do is get into the 21st century. You know, it doesn't make sense. I mean, those meetings, if you go to a sanitation district meeting that doesn't talk about TDMLs or doesn't talk about rates, they last about 5 minutes. The public coming to speak and ask questions takes more time than the rest of the meeting. And there was only like 3 or 4 of us, because the rest of it, they just blow through it. Well, you know, I mean, it's 30 years ago. I was at a company, and to eliminate airplane trips to one of our satellite facilities in Salt Lake City, we did teleconferencing, video teleconferencing, right? In today's environment, what would prevent the sanitation district from having our 2 heroes here in Santa Clarita and the sanitation district staff in Whittier, you know, all linked together with, I mean, how many meeting sites are there now where you can do that and see everybody and talk to everybody? Why don't we just stop playing games like it's 1922 and that you have to walk right down there? Yes, sir.
Yeah, they got the monitors right there in the council chamber.
Yes, they do.
Put them on there.
Yes, they do.
Does the districts
They got the
meet
cameras.
on a monthly basis, or is it as needed?
They do. I get their monthly agendas, and they cancel certain meetings. And if you've ever go down to one in Whittier, when they go through all the sanitation, most of it is just to pay bills and stuff, and they just blow through these things in 5 minutes. It is not worth going down there, okay? And I don't think that the public should have to go down to Whittier. You know, when I started looking this time at the sanitation district and how they operate, I sort of thought that they handled almost all of LA County, but they don't. You know what? They don't handle Los Angeles. They don't handle Burbank. Burbank has its own sanitation district. And you know, Burbank is using brine minimization now. They went to go see what brine minimization was looking like. They went to Burbank. You're going to tell me they didn't know Burbank was doing that before? So there's this big gap in who they service between us and the rest of the sanitation district. And I don't see any reason at all why you couldn't video conference that. I don't see any reason why at all at city council meeting you shouldn't be able to put up a video or put up a chart on their screen. They got to come in the 21st century, right? It's last time someone suggested that, Keller said, "Well, it's worked this way, or it's worked okay this way for 25 years," you know, and sounded just like my grandfather. All right, here we go. Deep well injection. I want to tell you what. Deep well injection caused a lot of commotion, and it's not dead. Currently, that satellite facility that's supposed to be built across the street from the existing facility, the plan is to dispose of brine using deep well injection. The plan for the large Newhall Ranch sanitation district plant is exactly the same thing: deep well injection with brine disposed for brine disposal. So I don't think this issue is over, and I don't think the folks on the west side understand that where they didn't get one, they may be getting another one right next to it. So we'll make sure they find out and they understand it. So it's not over. It's not over. We got one down. We got 2 more to go.